Want to learn more about your true nature? Check out the many interviews and short videos produced by our friends at ispirit.us. Like their page at facebook.com/ispirit.dotus and browse through their many posts and be inspired by the wonderful and positive messages about life that they share with their community. If you would like to study the works of Spiritism and delve deeper into this philosophy that will be guaranteed to enrich your life by teaching you about the greater life, check out ediseiofamerica.com. At ediseiofamerica.com you can find all of the seminal works of Spiritism written and compiled by Allan Kardec, translated from its original French to English, as well as other Spiritist works that serve to add to the immaterial treasure that is the Spiritist philosophy and doctrine. As one of our subscribers and followers, be sure to use promo code ispirit_love to get 10% off from your next purchase and continue to support this beautiful work of dissemination. ispirit_love to get 10% off from your next purchase. Thank you. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another one of our video series. In the last series, we talked about Spiritism in its simplest expression. We went over its 3 short chapters that provided an overview of the Spiritist doctrine itself. Now we're going to proceed to the next work that is of importance to us, that is entitled, What is Spiritism? This book was published in 1859 by Allan Kardec, 2 years after the release of the Spirit's book which occurred in 1857, and 1 year prior to the release of the Medium's book, which occurred in 1860. This book basically answers in a more detailed format the question that most of us have when we first hear about this wonderful doctrine. What is Spiritism? And it is split into 3 chapters. The first chapter is a grouping of different dialogues or conversations had with different characters that present themselves to Kardec to ask him questions concerning the Spiritist doctrine. Kardec thought that perhaps in constructing or building or structuring the work in this way, it would make it more dynamic and not as tedious as the previous format, which was sort of dogmatic, where you'd have different items and different numbers that would be explaining each of the different points of the Spiritist doctrine. Instead, we had here dialogues that would be relevant because they would be just like the dialogues or the questions that regular people would have concerning the studies of Spiritism. So this is why it was split into in that way. But for the purposes of our videos, we're not going to dig too deeply into this first chapter, or as a matter of fact, we're not going to go over it at all. And I encourage you all to read it because it really is worth it, because it causes us to reflect. But to get into it would be a bit difficult because of the way of the format in which it is found. So instead, we're going to jump right forward to chapter 2 and 3 of the book, because much like Spiritism in its simplest expression, it is also split into 3 chapters. And I'm going to read to you from the prologue what Kardec says concerning the 2nd chapter and the 3rd chapter. The 2nd chapter is devoted to a succinct exposition of the science's practical and experimental aspects, to which, in the absence of a complete study, novice observers should direct their attention with full knowledge of the facts. In a way, this chapter forms a summary of the Medium's book. Most often, objections arise from preconceived, wrong ideas concerning something one does not understand. To rectify such ideas means to anticipate the objections. Such is the goal of this little section. And the following chapter, which is the 3rd chapter, may be regarded as a summary of the Spirit's book, the one that was released 2 years prior to this book, which contains the Spiritist doctrine's solution to a number of problems of great psychological, moral, and philosophical interest. Problems posed daily and for which no philosophy has yet provided any satisfactory solution. If we try to solve them using some other theory, and without the key that Spiritism furnishes, we will realize that Spiritism's answers are still the most logical and those that better satisfy reason. And then we find at the very end of the prologue the wonderful succinct message that defines Spiritism for us, that says, Spiritism is simultaneously a science of observation and a philosophical doctrine. As a practical science, It consists in the relations that can be established with spirits. As a philosophy, it entails all the moral consequences that result from such relations. Hence, it may be defined as follows. Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relation with the corporeal world. So now let's get into Chapter 2 and talk a little bit about its content. Chapter 2 is entitled Elementary Notions of Spiritism. In section entitled Preliminary Remarks, in item 1, we find, from Kardec, it would be a mistake to think that witnessing a few extraordinary phenomena would be enough for certain disbelievers to be convinced. Those who cannot believe in a soul or spirit in a human being cannot believe in it outside a human being either. Consequently, by denying the cause, they deny the effect. Hence, they nearly always come with a preconceived idea and a negative stance that keeps them from making a serious and impartial observation. Of course, if we go into a science or a new field of study with preconceived ideas or notions or certain convictions about something, we're going to have a hard time accepting new ways of thinking or new ways of seeing things. Even though they might be right in front of us and the proof is right there, we are still going to perhaps not truly believe it and not accept it because it goes against our ways of thinking, our belief system. And this is something very difficult to deconstruct. All of us have a different type of belief system regarding every single facet of life. So whenever we find something new in front of us, we have to be very flexible and we have to be very open-minded to accept new things, because we don't know everything yet. We're very far from it. Humanity does not know everything yet. We're extremely far from it. So who are we to conclude and put a period behind any statement concerning life and science itself? There's still so much to learn and so much to see. So we cannot go into new fields of study and new adventures thinking that they're going to adhere to our preconceived notions. And if they don't adhere to our preconceived notions, that means that they do not stand, that they're false. So we can't do that. And if we do go into it, if we approach it in that manner with that type of stratagem in our brains, then clearly we're going to negate it from the get-go. There's not even a point in going in depth with a new study if we're already approaching it in this manner. So the idea is for us to be flexible, okay? So item 2 goes on to say, those who are unfamiliar with Spiritism believe that spirit phenomena can be produced in the same way that other phenomena can be produced in physics and chemistry experiments. Hence, their intention to subject them to their will and their refusal to place themselves in the conditions needed to observe them. So here we have a serious problem, because those who want to experiment with this type of thing think that they can control the environment, much like we see in physics and chemistry. But the problem is that we're not dealing with inanimate matter. We're not dealing with things that we can actually make manifest. We're dealing with discarnate intelligences. In other words, we're dealing with personalities like us that are outside of the body. So they're not going to be answering to our beck and call at every moment. They're going to come to us whenever they feel like they need to come to us, whether it be by due to a certain affinity they may have with one of us, or because they have an interest in helping us understand this new knowledge. However, we cannot make any of these free intelligences come to us. So there is no control, so to speak, over this type of experimentation. The idea is for us to sit patiently and quietly and wait for these things to come to us, to manifest themselves instead of us making them become manifest or manifest themselves. And reading onwards, it says, since in principle they do not believe in the existence and intervention of spirits, at least they do not understand their nature or their modes of action. They act as if they were dealing with raw matter. And since they did not get what they were asking for, they conclude that there are no spirits after all, which is a very ignorant way to approach things. Just because we don't see it, because the things don't manifest themselves, it doesn't mean that they're not there. We can't control free intelligences. It is like we would try to control certain people, random people on the street, and tell them to come to us and do things we want them to do. Would we be successful in that? It would be rather difficult unless we gave them some incentive, money or food or something like that, or a voucher to go have a free meal somewhere or a free gift somewhere. But we can't do that with spirits, because nothing of this world that we can offer them will make them want to come to us. So in essence, we can't just control them. So we have to wait for them to come to us, like I said before. And to conclude that there are no spirits after all is, again, very ignorant, because it is like saying that, okay, there is no electricity, there is no steam, there is no oxygen, there's nothing like that, because I can't see those things. There are no molecules, there are no atoms, there are no cells, there's nothing like that, because I can't see those things. Of course not. Those things were invisible to us until we had the tools to see them. And with the microscope, obviously a new world opened itself up to us, the miniature world, the world of the microscopic living beings that are within us and in the air around us. So we have to think of it this way. Perhaps later on down the road, in the far future, or maybe even in the near future, we'll develop an instrument that will allow us to see this reality of life as well, this greater reality, this amplified reality. But for the time being, we have to just accept the current situation and deal with the tools that are given to us, which is to wait for these entities to manifest themselves, to come to us. If they look at the issue from a different perspective, they would understand that spirits are human souls, that after death we ourselves will be spirits, and that we too would be ill-disposed to serve as playthings to satisfy the fantasies of the curious, of course. Item 3 says, even though certain phenomena may be induced because they result from free intelligences, they are never at our complete disposal, as I had mentioned before. No matter who we are, and whoever attempted to obtain them at will would be demonstrating either their ignorance or their bad faith, as I had summarized prior to this. We must wait for the phenomena and understand them as they happen, and quite frequently it is at the moment when it is least expected that the most interesting and most conclusive incidents occur. Persons who seriously want to learn must therefore approach the subject like all others with patience and perseverance, and do everything that needs to be done. Otherwise, they would be better off not to concern themselves with the matter. So that's it for the first section. If you're curious to study these things, first off, it has to be in an environment where you are open to learning these things, where you're open to perhaps experiencing these new things. And obviously, we don't have places like those around the world. They're not very easily, you can't really go into them. They're not everywhere in every corner of the street. So we do have the Spirita centers here in the United States. We have them in Brazil as well. We have thousands of them. And that is a place where we can go and learn a little bit about this. But the best way to actually truly understand Spiritism these days is to read about the fundamental works. Read the in-depth details of the studies that were done during Kardec's time, and we will learn the things that we need to understand about Spiritism without needing to see these manifestations. Because if anyone with some common sense approaches these works and reads them, they will drink these works like that heavenly water that quenches their existential thirst. And as soon as you do this, you're no longer going to be questioning the reality of these things, because now you're going to be approaching it with the foundation and the knowledge of the aspects and the building blocks of Spiritism, instead of going towards this type of idea without that background. Because if you go into any science without knowing its background and its principles or its doctrine, we are going to fail. In the things that we see, we're going to lack the understanding to process the events that are occurring before us within ourselves. But when we study these things and we have the knowledge and the background prior to acting in this science, in this study, then all of a sudden we actually don't need to even see these things manifesting themselves, because it just makes sense. It's logical for us to understand life as this reality, that there are things out there. There are other intelligences that have left the body when they have discarnated or died and continued on in their personalities and their consciences, but they're liberated from the heavy burden of the physical life. So it is very interesting in this aspect. So I invite you all to begin reading this wonderful book and read the first chapter, which is the wonderful dialogue between different personalities concerning Spiritism. We have a skeptic, we have a priest, among other characters that Kardec chose wisely to use to provide to the reader the different perspectives that these skeptical identities would have towards the Spirit's manifestations. So this is it for this video, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much, and may God bless each and every one of you.